All right, so as I mentioned in my email, there are 10 people total on the committee. Ethan came in and just on time, so we have 6 people for a quorum. So that means we can make an official decision today on whether or not to proceed with discussion related to this topic. And the way I'm trying to frame it is proceeding with this discussion related to this topic, regardless of location. So it wouldn't be focusing on just the East Rec, no matter where something like this might go. And I specifically said in the email facility or facilities, alluding to the fact that it could be combined in the future or it could be separate. And overall, just taking a look at these things, in terms of the transformative projects, one major thing that we wanted to talk about with transformative projects is impact to an area outside of that specific project. And so related to this project, no matter where we think the police station or fire station or the community center or a combination goes, there will be impacts on the adjacent neighborhood in terms of interaction with the facilities, what programs or services are available, especially at the community center, and interactions like that go beyond just the facility itself. Additionally, in the summary that I passed out and that I'll get up on the screen here for everybody, just by sheer numbers, budget numbers and cost numbers, this is a huge project for the city. Not going to sugarcoat it. It's one of the biggest projects that we've undertaken in the recent past, or that we will be undertaking in the recent past. And so you see some information about potential costs down at the bottom of that page that I sent out. And let me get that up on the screen for everybody. And so the city manager, Chad Ubel, is here today to help us if we decide to go ahead and discuss this, kind of help to answer questions and kind of get a little bit more in depth. But I just wanted to get some basic numbers out there, just taking a look at what the consultants that we have so far have put together for us. You can see the numbers there. And so essentially what you're seeing is that standalone, the 3 facilities would cost more than a combined facility. And that's part of the discussion that has been going on in terms of combining the facility for cost purposes. In addition, combining the facilities for the potential to get state funding related to the project. And state funding has been seen most recently for combination police fire facilities. There's a number of other considerations that come into play that we can discuss. And before I would ask if there's any questions or comments ahead of time and ask if there would be a motion to go ahead and discuss this, and then I would look for a second and then a vote after that. I'll ask Chad if there's anything that you wanted to comment on. That's good. Okay.
I'll move to go ahead and discuss it.
I'll second.
Any comments or questions? And that includes those who are online.
I think my only caveat will be I have not been following this at all. So I feel somewhat inept in terms of speaking to it, but I'm happy to always explore anything, but just wanted to throw that out there that I have not been following the general sentiment in terms of like the arguments for. I'm sure there's reasons why it was proposed and then the arguments against. I know that I think this is a relatively hot topic right now, but I have not been following it.
Sure, and the one thing I could say is that it's definitely not the role of this committee to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down on the specific project. Really what we're looking to do is discuss it, knowing that in the future, there's some type of improvements that are going to have to be made to police, fire, and community center. And so if those improvements are made in the terms of new facilities, what are some considerations in the future for those facilities, no matter where they go? So hopefully that helps to kind of take away from that. Even though you haven't been intricately involved in everything, we're looking for you as just a person who lives in Winona and who is on the subcommittee your feelings in terms of considerations related to the facilities.
That's helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
Just have an information question regarding the funding, state funding specifically. I understand in order to be eligible for the bond funding, it's got to be a combined fire and police facility. Do we also have to combine a community center with that to qualify?
Can we vote?
Yeah,
Just before we get too far into the weeds here, I mean, at some point, you're making the argument for it before we even. vote.
No, I'm not making an argument for it. I'm just wanting that information.
But we're starting to
out.
talk about it more than we're actually voting on it.
Well,
we vote on
it helps to have full information on the table. And I think that since the breakdown on cost is right here,
Which
knowing
also,
how much,
which also weighs whether we should talk.
Well, to this point, you probably all read it in the paper that when the representatives were asked from the state, what have you seen come forward for bond funding in the past? It's been a combined police and fire, but not with that community center component combined as well. So,
and by the way, we are discussing the motion.
Sure, no, I understand.
all right. Any other comments or questions? So I'll go ahead and ask those in favor of the motion to discuss the police, fire, and community center facility or facilities, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
5-1. So we do have a majority seeking to discuss. So we'll move forward with discussion at this meeting. And just in terms of next steps, so what I'm looking to do here with all of the subjects that we've talked about is get it back into that framework, that template that I originally provided, where we do a project rationale, project partners, and then considerations for each. And so for each of the topics, what we'll do is at the next meeting, I will have, we'll walk through the summaries, each one. This is my draft for the housing discussion that we had. And so what I'll do is make sure that I can get those to you ahead of time so you can review them ahead of time. So we'll take a look at each one of these topics. And then at our final meeting on the 31st, we'll ask if there's any additions or changes to the summaries. And then at that meeting, we'll have basically a final vote, a final decision to include things or not include things, and how to move forward. Namely, who would be a good, or who would like to, or maybe who isn't at the meeting, be a spokesperson for this committee moving forward. Basically to bring these projects to the steering committee and say, hey, we voted, we talked about these projects. This is kind of what we're presenting to you. And then from there, it will go to steering committee to planning commission, city council. We'll have a draft. We are aiming for the end of October.
For the steering committee or the draft?
For a draft of the comprehensive plan, the first draft.
When would that steering committee presentation be?
We're looking in September, one in the first part of September and one in the last part of September. I don't know, Luke, if you have.
That's tentatively the 9th and the 28th.
Yeah, or the 28th. What we think we might do is split it up between the two. We're not sure if we can get all the committees on one day.
Sorry, yeah, the 8th and the 29th.
8th and 29th.
I'll wait one day extra.
So with this discussion, I'd like to suggest kind of breaking the discussion up into a few different questions to, for the sake of clarity and to help us kind of focus on specific issues. So the ones I would propose would be a few different questions, and obviously these can be worked around different ways, but I'd say 1, should there be a new fire station? 2, should there be a new police station? 3, should there be a combined police and fire station? 4, should any of the above be built on the current site of the East End Rec Center? And 5, should the Transformative Project Subcommittee be involved at all? That's kind of how I'd suggest dividing this up to.
Well, and just to think about Jessica's comments, it might be good just to bring people up to speed generally before we break.
Yeah.
Because I think your questions are great, but
That's a very, yeah.
Yeah, because I don't think you're alone, Jessica, in having that, that feeling of not knowing all of the different components, so that might be a good place to start, just for an overview.
And just taking a step back respectfully, Ethan, the way I think it'll be most beneficial to frame this, especially in the future, when we move forward with the comprehensive plan and taking a look at this, and if there's questions about, what this committee discussed and whatnot, I think it's valuable for us not to try and get at that question of should we do it or should we not do it? Because that's really, respectfully, it's not really the purview of this subcommittee. So what I would do is try to answer your questions and talk about your questions in a way to say that if a new fire station is built, right, these are the considerations that need to be
Okay.
taken into account. If a new community center is built, these are the considerations that need.
Okay, that's not, so and instead of should there or should there not be?
Exactly.
Okay, what about the last one, about should this committee be involved in that?
There's no reason why you can't discuss it, but
Right, yeah, mhm.
I think the answer to that is it's not the committee's purview to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down on police, fire, or community center.
Okay.
But what would be super valuable, and the reason why we want to talk about it this way is no matter what happens, hearing from each of you about things the city staff need to be thinking about moving forward, is something that we can utilize as we proceed. So, and then the final thing being, should a police, fire, and community center be built, no matter what location, what are some considerations of the combination as well?
If maybe, I don't want to speak for you, but maybe the question that you were raising in that last question is like, do these projects, a project qualify as a transformative project? Because it doesn't seems like, yeah, we could talk about any project that the city might have, but I don't think these necessarily qualify as a transformative project. And so that to me seems like it's outside of the purview of the committee to just talk about it, period. These could be each considered important things that our community needs on their own or as a combined project, however you think about it. But it doesn't mean that they're transformative. It just means that they're things the city's gonna do. It's just basic kind of infrastructure maintenance. It's not a transformative anything. It's not really bringing anything new to the community in a transformative sense. And so that I think might be the reason why our committee would not take a stand on them, because it's just like, this is happening. This is part of basic infrastructure. It's nothing new. And so it falls outside the purview of what our committee was designed to do.
And I think that at our next meeting is when we can, I think that regardless of if you want to call it a transformative project or not, it either combined or separately, they're significant projects. And so if we decide not to have the full write-up in the plan, what we would do is put it at the end and saying other significant projects include. And then note that this is a topic of discussion. It is something that we discussed, but we decided not to include it in the full write-up.
I think the financial impact, potential financial impact makes it significant, if not transformative.
Sure. And so what I'll do is I'll go ahead, since we already decided to discuss it today, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I will put everything together into kind of that format that I showed you for the other committees for our next meeting and for you all to review ahead of time. And then at that next meeting is when we'll decide, not just for this one, but also for the field house as well. Are we going to have the full write-up, or are we going to have more just a reference or a mention at the end of the section?
Yeah, that was the other one I was sort of thinking.
Yep.
Cool.
Just oh, go ahead.
Yeah, we should probably talk about the background again.
Yeah, and that's what I think it'd be good to see if we can hand it over to Chad a little bit to, talk a little bit about some of the process that's happened thus far, and, add some more depth and information to the simple bullet points that I have here. So I'll hand it over to you, Chad, if you want to give kind of just a little bit background on how things have come up so far.
Certainly give the background. I think
My thought today would be that it would be rather condensed. I mean, we've had several public input, or we've had one public input session, we've had several pre-council meetings, we've had several years of planning, so there, I mean, there's a lot of content in here, and I certainly don't want to miss any points, so if you have follow-up questions or you want me to clarify, but I think it's, even just for the sake of time, I'm not even sure I could do that in the 45 minutes we have left. So I'm gonna really condense it. And again, and then if there's questions about some of the things that I'm mentioning, then certainly bring that forward. I'll start with the community center. We recently were asked, how long have you been working on potential for a new community center? And we have some information going back to 2005, where we've done some studies that were really focused on older adults and our friendship center. And their desire, members of that facility, their desire to have a new location. And we did some, we had Henry Lester do a study, came back about demographics and growing older adult population, what those needs would be. Frankly, that discussion didn't go much further than that study, other than in 2008-9, the concept came back again when the city was going to propose a bond referendum for 5 recreational projects. It was to combine the Friendship Center at the East Rec. It was to expand and renovate Lake Lodge into a 2-story boat facility with patio, small restaurant, kind of restaurants, maybe a little bit too strong of a word, but you could sit out there and enjoy a beverage and maybe an appetizer kind of thing. It was to improve the ski trails at St. Mary's University. It was to expand and add a second sheet of ice to Bud King. And it was to do improvements to Baminick Fields, softball fields down around the lake. And at that time, that was not the Winona State baseball field, that was just softball fields. Thought there was bring tournaments in, pinwheel style. Real quick, we can think of the timing, that was 2009, we were proposing a bond referendum. The time, then the Mayor Miller, which now in hindsight was a wise move, said we're not moving forward with this project. It's not, I mean, the economic forecast is not looking good, and the project was scrapped. Now, some of those things have happened in different formats, but again, going back to all the way to 2005, 2009, and then in earnest again in 2017, we've looked at the Friendship Center moving into a combined facility at the East Rec. Shortly, well, really, I don't know the date off the top of my head, I'm sorry, but right around the start of the pandemic, we were also, the council was pursuing looking at a redesigned fire station. Again, the current central fire station has been on the CIP for approximately 20 years, if not a bit longer, about needed renovations within that facility. Again, if you have follow-up questions about those needs, I can go over those, but in general, space needs, employee needs that are significant related to fire, coming back with equipment that's has carcinogenics on it, size of equipment that is out of our control, that is no longer fits in the facility. And the city began in the mid-90s, late 90s to acquire some properties next to the central fire station, but thought that we would expand that facility. Again, I have to be honest, I don't know specific dates, but again, around that 2019 time frame, the county also was in discussions with proposing the new jail facility. The city was involved in those discussions. Our former city manager was involved in those discussions with former county administrator.
Our current chief of police was in conversations with the sheriff's department, the county. We had council members on the jail, one council member on the jail committee, looking at renovating the current LEC. The idea there is that, and the rationale for doing that study was that, again, we have space and facility needs for our police department. The decision was not to renovate the LEC, that, and again, we feel that was a county decision at that time, was not to renovate the current LEC that houses our police station. We have a lease with the county to lease space at the LEC. That lease is ending at the end of 2023. Certainly doesn't mean we can't renew it, but the jail facility that was approved by the county does not include any additional space for police department or any renovated new space for the police. So if you take where the council was looking at renovated community center, at the same time understanding we had fire needs, now needed fire and police needs combined, the council voted, this current council voted 7-0 to hire BKV to look at a combined facility. And the task in that direction by the council was to have BKV look for a location that could house a combined police and fire facility. So at that time, the council did vote for a combined facility, primarily for the purpose of regional training. And of course, it goes without saying that there was some financial consideration, given that a combined facility had the potential to have some cost savings if the facilities were combined, and that we could explore state bonding for a combined facility, mainly due to that regional impact. BKV did study several locations within the community. Not all of them were presented to council, and I only say that because there were some that during the process were either sold or that they were really private property that we had said, oh, BKV didn't realize that this is actually a private property. And you know, the Fastenal parking lot is although we could discuss it, I mean, it's I think Fastenal wants to keep their parking lot. It wasn't something that we just threw out options just because it was, there's some private property that was like, well, it's not for sale, and some items like that. What BKV then did was they took 10 years of call data, primarily our fire department calls over a 10-year period. They compiled all that data and said, what we need to establish is locations that are within an appropriate response time to keep the city's ISO rating low. And I'll explain ISO rating here in a minute. For those of you that don't know, we have a West Fire Station that is on one side of the tracks for Winona, and a Central Fire Station that's on the other side of the tracks in Winona. And so depending upon where the call comes in, either the West Station responds first or Central Fire responds first. Majority of the time, Central Fire responds first. But in those cases where it's in an area of this community where it's more advantageous for the West Station to respond, the West Station responds first. So they look at, they basically did a heat map and showed, here are all your calls for West Station, here's all your calls for Central Fire. You should be within this zone of the city to have appropriate response time for your new Central Fire Station. Again, they looked at 9 locations. Some of those locations were downtown, some were on East End, some were far East End, some were I would consider southeast. Some of those we've been asked, well, why didn't you present all of those? Some of the locations When you think about it, it was literally on the wrong side of the tracks. We would have two stations on the location downtown would put us on the wrong side of the tracks. So BKV presented those 9 locations. And one of the top locations was the East Rec location due to response time. So at that time, we had presented back to them to council that if they'd like us to pursue, we would engage with St. Stan's for the purchase of the St. Stan's School Building, which will be vacated after this school year, with the idea that we would demo the current St. Stan's School, build a new 2-gym community center facility. Again, estimated at right around the $11 million estimate. On that location, then we would tear down the existing East Recreation Center and build a combined police and fire facility. Within that, there of course are a lot of unknowns. One is whether or not St. Stan's actually wants to sell that property, and if they don't, then this project, again, to Carlos's earlier point, we would need to look at different locations. We're not 100% sure that we'll be successful in getting state bonding. I mean, obviously that's never a slam dunk, and so we could put a proposal in, it could be denied, and we wouldn't move forward with the project. The idea of having a new community center and new fire facility, police facility then would not stop. We would continue then to reset and replan. So at the moment, the council, as we are here today, the council's directive is to continue to negotiate with St. Stan's and continue to pursue the East Rec site. Guess that's it in less than 15 minutes. Again, if you want me to expand anything, I certainly can, or touch on anything more, I certainly can. Otherwise, open for discussion.
I guess I would ask Jessica if there's any questions that she has, and I feel like I at one point did get a lot of information on this. So is there more that you'd want to know?
No, that was a really helpful introduction. So the one question I had is there an assumption that from an economies of scale perspective, that by doing that project, that means that there wouldn't be duplication anywhere. So there'd be one recreation community center. So even if it's not that location, it's somewhere else, does that mean then you would not have the East End Rec Center? There'd be one community center in Winona, there'd be one friendship center that would be inclusive of that. Is that the assumption, or like, does that make sense?
Yes. The answer would be yes.
Okay.
The one community center inclusive of the Friendship Center and our East Rec programming and services that are currently happening there.
Got it. Thank you.
Which I think it's maybe important, just quick other note is also the move of the Friendship Center. Besides the myriad of reasons why that space isn't adequate for them, the opportunity Winona started with downtown redevelopment, and we have to date invested over $3 million into Masonic Temple with the idea that that would be a multi-purpose arts venue. And we have heard from several arts nonprofits that they'd like to use that building and have indicated that not that they prefer the Friendship Center be out, but that they would be interested in our first floor if in fact the Friendship Center was not there. And so we don't mention the Masonic Temple very often in this concept, but it's also the idea that the city then would work with local nonprofit arts organizations to activate that building as well.
I have a question about the combined police and fire. You talked about response times and all of the logistics about where to locate a fire station. Does the police station track directly with where a fire station wants to be, or would a police station actually have different priorities if it was to be sited alone and not part of a fire department?
Different priorities. And I think I'm comfortable enough saying that the chief of police have said really that their location from response time and because of the way that patrol works, you know, they don't have the same parameters or guidelines that a fire department would. Which brings me back, sorry, I said I would talk about ISO. Let's talk about ISO really quick. ISO rating is really important for a community because it affects all of us. Whether you're a residential homeowner, whether you're a renter, whether you own industrial property, whether you own a commercial property, the city's ISO rating relates to the type of fire insurance or protection home insurance that you can get. So again, if you're a renter, if you own your property, industrial, commercial, that helps keep those insurance costs low when the city has a good ISO rating. The ISO ratings work a little bit like golf. The lower your score, the better. 1 is the best rating you can have, then 2, 3, 4, 5. And the city of Winona currently has an ISO rating of 2. And because of the parameters for 1, they are given out to larger communities. We will never be able to fly, I don't know, 3,040, I don't know, but because of the size and parameters within ISO ratings, the highest we can go in our current population and other factors is a 2. And so that's all taken into account that if this fire station is put someplace else and that it could have impact on an ISO rating. If that dropped it to a 3 because of response time, then residential homeowners, potentially renters, industrial, commercial, they end up paying amounts for their fire insurance coverage.
Are those ISO ratings done every year on an annual basis, or is there a bigger? chunk of
I
time?
believe it may be about every 2 years. I think it is. Yes. I'll confirm that, Nancy. I know it's not annual,
Okay,
and I know it's not like a 5-year. I'm fairly confident it's a 2-year. Every 2 years we renew.
and then once if you would go to a 3 or 4, it also takes a period of time to go back to a 2, because 2 is ideal for us.
Correct.
Okay.
And we're at a 2 right now.
We are at a 2. We have been at a 2 for shoot. I don't know how long, but it's been several cycles now of the ISO review. We've been at 2.
And are we at danger of losing that if we don't?
We're not currently,
Okay.
but again, that's why the fire piece of this is the location does have larger impact
Okay.
than again, as Jim just asked in police.
And actually piggybacking on his questions, what has been the expressed desire of the fire department and the police department?
Sorry, so
What do fire and police want?
Oh, yes. I mean, I think they've, at the public meetings and at the informational sessions, they've said that they certainly want to combine. They see some advantages to combining. I think fire, because of the space required for apparatus day and some of their training is concerned that that they have some real specific training and they don't. I think maybe where there's been some hesitation from police and fire, it's more fire saying we have really specific training needs that can't be modified or in quotations compromised. You can say, well, there's a meeting room and you can do training in there. Fire is quick to point out, no, we need specific training spaces and technology and where maybe police is just, maybe a little bit more, we need a meeting room to meet privately with some individuals. And that those two can't be, in a sense, can be combined. So we've had some, fire being very, very adamant about we don't have issues with combining with the police, but we also have very specific needs that need to be addressed, again, more than the police department.
Thank you. And how they feel, I guess I did read some of that report about their current locations, or let's say expanding it redeveloping in those locations how they would want to.
Yes. So. Well, I think I understood your question correctly, but like,
Okay.
if the central fire station, for example, wouldn't be at their current location. And we've talked about housing, because housing is the number one thing that's coming out of the comp plan, that we could redevelop that site for housing.
So maybe it was the opposite. If they were to stay there,
Oh, yep,
what would they like to see? You know, how do they feel about a remodel or, you know, complete rebuild at the current sites?
So we are working on getting what I would call an official word from the architect on the jail project about remodeling the current location, because we've asked that a lot about, we've been asked a lot about, can police stay, can they remodel? I can go in a lot of detail, but short answer is because of the way the footings were done and the way the jail is located, the expansion of the LEC or a remodel of the LEC has become very complicated. Now, we're trying to get the architect to tell us what very complicated means. And to have a formal response instead of, you know, just us sort of blanket talking about it and explaining the costs. But the decision to build the jail where it is impacting the ability for us to renovate at the current police station. The jail project also is doing some renovations to the dispatch center and some adjustments to the sheriff's department. I'm not as familiar with that. Those adjustments are, but that's impacting our ability to remodel where we are. We could remodel the LEC, we would gain no extra space. That's been one of our concerns. And a larger concern on the financial side is, what is the renovation cost? How is that cost borne on the city? And if it's all borne on the city or the county? And either way, what the answer to that is what does that do to our annual rent payment? So if you assume a new renovated space, we assume our rental price is going to go up. And I think it's important to know what that is, because again, we levy that amount back to the taxpayers for rent. And so there's been some discussion about, well, that rental payment could potentially pay part of a debt service for a bond. And that the city owns and operates some facility.
Has the city and the county actually talked about what that could be like? I mean, I talked with Mayor Sherman on Thursday and he said he's had conversations with the county, but he wouldn't tell me about them. And so it's hard to actually have this conversation when it seems like it's speculation about who would pay for what or how much rent would cost. And so it makes it more challenging for, as a member of the public to say like, well, you should remodel it or you shouldn't. And I don't really know if the city and the county are talking at all. And my impression from Attorney Sonneman and Chair Meyer is they would love to have the police stay there. That's my, word of mouth. I can't, that's not their official public statements, but.
Yes. Scott, you're 100% right. That's why I kind of started with, we really want the architect to tell us whether it's possible.
No, I can't speak to that.
And
for
then,
sure.
yeah, and then,
I'm not an engineer.
no. But to your point, it's a great starting point, because if it just really can't happen, I'd like to know it just can't.
Sure.
Or, because the way the jail's built, it's 13 million to get new footings in, whatever. I'm being facetious.
No, yeah.
It just becomes cost prohibitive. The chief of police and myself met with Maureen Holte, the interim county administrator, 3 weeks ago, again, about combined and renovated and what does that mean? Again, I'm comfortable saying there was no discussion from Maureen on the county side about, well, we would increase your rent or what that amount would be. So I think that starting point is, well, how much would it be? And that's what we're trying to gather that information so that we can respond to the public about that specifically. So,
And
those discussions are ongoing.
if there was an increase in rent, does that come from a different pot of money than it would be for new construction?
Yes.
Okay. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Our current rent payment comes out of our general fund.
Okay.
Our general fund is primarily funded through taxpayer dollar, so it's levied. Again, if we go up for a bump, in a sense, it's the same pot, but it's a different financial mechanism. I'm sorry. It's the same general fund, but it's a different funding mechanism.
Gotcha.
So we pay rent we levy that rent amount to the taxpayer.
Okay.
If we would borrow, for just discussion purposes, 20 million for a bond, local bond. Again, that debt payment service does come out of the general fund and it's levied to the taxpayer. But we track it differently. We have to, because we're borrowing the money, we have to, it's another funding mechanism or tool that we have to track differently than we currently are paying our rent. But ultimately, bottom line, we have to tax. We have to tax the people or raise our tax levy in order to either pay for both. Rent, increase rent, and or debt service, so.
And a comment to circle back to where Carlos kind of started, that irregardless of whether we renovate the LEC or build a new police station, the needs and parameters under which those would be done would be the same. And that's, Carlos, is that kind of what we should be talking about, is what we talk about would help to make that decision of whether we renovate or build new. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, so what I would say is, from this committee's perspective, what do you see in terms of some considerations of, what the police department needs? And obviously, in terms of the, specifics, that's detailed as in BKV, and the department can get into that. But, I think part of it too is that from a just a normal citizen or a normal resident perspective, you want your police department facility to be able to be attractive and for recruiting and retention of officers, so that you can continue to have that in your community and continue to have that as a part of your community. And so that's something too where for the police department and the fire department, some of those needs are, I can fill in some of the blanks related to that. But just from a general perspective, from a resident perspective, why is it important for you to have these facilities in your city? Also related to the community center, if you're going to have a community center in your in the city, what are some important things that need to be part of that community center? Again, we have our studies and we have, the people that use a community center that we could talk to and say, yeah, that this is all the things that we need. But just as a lay person related to this, what would be your input on all three of those things? Does that help, Jim?
Yeah, and I think that just to guide the rest of our time, what the discussion that we have and the recommendations we make will help the city make all of these decisions of whether they get combined, where they get located, and all those ongoing decisions that have to be made. We can give some guidance to that, to give them maybe goalposts or boundaries of to having those discussions. Is that what we should be doing here as a group?
Exactly. And so what I see this is, if this is something that's incorporated into the comprehensive plan, there'll probably still be work going on in this project in the future, but it would be put in the comprehensive plan saying, at the time the plan was written, there were discussions about this. We had this committee and some considerations that this committee brought up at that time were this, and this. And that'll help inform future decisions that are made.
Two real quick, more clarification questions. When St. Stan's has been asked, hasn't been asked, have they?
We've had several discussions, St.
Okay.
Stan,
Unclear, you said?
unknown.
Okay.
They have a process that they have to go through even to respond back to us whether or not they're interested.
Okay.
So beyond negotiations and a price for the property, we are just simply waiting for a yes or no.
Okay.
And part of that delay is that the Diocese of Winona, Rochester owns St. Stan's. On 29th of July, they just installed a new bishop. Old bishop didn't want to make a decision until the new bishop was in. New bishop doesn't want to make a decision first month on the job. So St. Stan's at this point has said that by the end of September, they would get back to us just simply whether or not they're willing to negotiate. So if they say yes, we've got a lot of work to negotiate a price. If they say no, it's back to proverbial drawing board.
And then what about Fastenal? You said that one of the Fastenal,
Just an example.
okay,
Yeah,
have
that
they
was
been
just an
asked?
example I gave.
at all about buying any property?
So if I could add to the contextualization that Chad provided, so there was a public hearing on July 5th. Prior to that public hearing, there were a couple weeks in which the community could comment online. Four of this committee members were there. I was there, Ethan was there, Lydia, not here today, was there, and Jerome was there. I don't think Lydia would mind me saying that I and Lydia spoke in opposition to the current plan. I think it'd be accurate to say Jerome spoke in favor of the current plan. Okay, I didn't want to miscalculate, which is why
I spoke strongly in favor of the reputation and good name of the police and fire department. And also pointed out that the plan that's being presented is not without merit, in particular in regard to response time and funding needs to be given serious consideration.
okay, I didn't want to mischaracterize. You know, generally speaking, it seemed like, you know, there were, you know, from the online comments and from the in-person comments, there were 139 people who opposed the plan and 5 or 6 people who supported it, which is roughly a 96% opposition rate. And so in my thinking about this, irrespective of my individual thoughts, that simple fact seems like a variable in this committee's consideration, that if there's that much public opposition, it seems to be something worth considering. Obviously, it's not a perfect sample of all community sentiment, but it seems like a fairly strong sense of community feeling. And so that is not in response to any funding for the community center, any funding for the police department, that was just to the specific plan. So I don't want to say everyone who spoke that night or wrote in online didn't want to give money anywhere. It was just to the specific East End Direct plan. So it's just context.
Wonder, just thinking about that, and there's a lot of sentiments out there, but it's also just one way to get information from people, and maybe not, especially in the current climate of our just arena of voting and all of those kinds of giving information. I don't think everybody's comfortable putting anything online because of retribution or people, you know, saying something back at them that they just aren't comfortable, maybe, you know, expressing their view in that way. Not that there shouldn't be another way or another type of survey that people could weigh in on, and 136 people out of 27,000 people, keeping that in context of the community, you know, the size of our community is one factor. And I wonder if there's just not other factors to look at or other ways to gather input from the community, because I'm not to dismiss this at all. So I think that's significant, but are there other ways to find out information from the community that would be just give more information? Because it seems like all of the things that are happening are all happening without any conclusions. And there's a lot of conversation without a lot of, at the end, like, can we do this or can we not do this? Or, you know, that bonding thing, I think, does need more clarification. And how do you know, what does that mean? You know, in that combined, you know, combined funding is kind of, it's a big deal, because at the end of the day, it ends up being a taxpayer consideration. And if it can be combined at a smaller rate that impacts in a different way.
Yep.
You know, do people understand that it's hard? I mean, funding is super complicated.
Yep.
And not every, you know, it's just not a common conversation because people don't understand it.
Well, I think the other thing that I could find observes is a real mismatch between the comments and the proposed project. And that most of the comments were critical of and hostile to police in general. And expressing a generalized concern for police anyway. And didn't really speak to the issue of replacing the current rec center with a new and improved facility with twice the gym space and additional facilities, far in excess of what is currently the old East End rec. So I don't think that it was the concerns were all that tear down the East rec and leave nothing here, rather than replace this facility with a new and upgraded facility. And I think that shifting the discussion into that context, rather than we're afraid that somebody doesn't like police. Shades that whole public hearing and online comment dramatically.
And I think we could definitely, for this section, I'll of course note, progress that has been made thus far, including the public hearing, and, that can be part of the consideration as well, as in addition to, what was said at that public hearing, that type of thing. So I definitely think that could be part of it, but I want to pull us back a little bit, get us a little bit more general and start talking about things. And I know you have to head out.
As much as probably most of you would think, why would he leave this meeting in a project like this? I have a community mental health broad discussion at 2:30, and so I need to attend that. It's just as if not more important. I apologize. I have to.
Thanks, Chad.
Carlos, can I jump in with this an observation? So,
You have your hand raised. Thank you for raising it.
yeah, I'm being patient over here.
Yeah.
So, I was thinking, just from a more global level, regardless, if you need infrastructure or plant improvements, So the transformation piece for me isn't whether or not you need to plant a new facility. It's the dominoes that fall. So what is the transformational opportunity that emerges based on how you either co-locate or not any of those existing facilities? So I think like the point about you have nonprofits saying we really want the Masonic Temple as a art space. That's the transformation that I'm interested in. But then what needs to happen up front for us to have that happen? And that's where I think this potential project kind of butts up against that. So yeah, I think that's just something I've been thinking about as we've been talking is what opportunities are emerging by later on in our strategy by virtue of how we align this project.
Definitely, and there's a ton of different considerations, and that's why this is pretty complex, when it comes into exactly like you said, in terms of the different dominoes. The other thing that we deal with, we constantly get faced with all the time in Winona is our limited land situation. And so, if something goes in one place, a lot of times there's something already there that either has to be changed or relocated or something like that. If we're going to put it in an area, that's close to people, essentially. So that's another consideration. But I can definitely kind of hit on that in terms of the summary that I put together for this committee. Since we are kind of butting up on that 1 hour time frame, I know there's a ton of background and everything, but related to considerations of community center, police department, fire department, is there anything just top of mind for those who are here? Things that no matter where they go, you think that it would be important for us to note in the plan?
Well, I think that by combining and this, for one thing, it's going to open up that fire department plan for redevelopment. It's also going to potentially shift a large part of the expense. And if we can get it put on a state bond, it sort of points the way to approach other major capital projects. Since it's a regional, based on each regional impact, to be looking at our capital projects throughout the city in terms of regional projects rather than simply local urban municipal projects. You know, the domino effect is really going to be the biggest transformative impact on this.
Yeah, so trying to put it in context of that, I'm also just gonna pretty big blatantly just say what I would like to see.
Sure.
In my opinion, I would be quite happy to see a combined fire station at that Fastenal parking lot spot. That's in the location of the old YMCA. And putting it in context of the transformative effects of that, are two big ones. One, I'd hate to see the East End Rec Center even change, even if it is a new place and, on paper is an upgrade. From the learning that I've done, people I've talked to, it seems like that would risk losing what it has right now. And what it seems to be right now is a fantastic return on investment for the city. From what I understand, it seems to do a ton with very little. Also, I would hate to lose the police department downtown. Especially living downtown, I like having the police downtown. I like that their routes, all come from downtown. They're there more often. They get to see, where there's more people, where there's bars, where there's tourists. As a downtown resident, I like seeing that. I'd like to see more police, and especially out on foot would be wonderful. And just thinking location wise, from what I see already, at least for police, I do not know fire routes well. Most of the police routes seem to go, up and down Huff and Riverview Drive. So it seems like a decent location. That parking lot is fairly used right now. And it sounds like the, difference between buying that and buying St. Stan's land is at this point a toss up. So that's what I'd love to see.
Okay.
I'm in favor of a combined opportunity. I do like the intergenerational between the seniors and the kids, at the East End Rec Center, but I don't, I don't see the issue with the police department being combined with that, but I think there's also the benefit of the bonding. Which, if I understand it right, there's something that has to happen in order for that funding to even be available to the city. So, it'd be nice to know more about that. I think there's some really good ways that there could be relationship building between the fire, police, and our students and our older citizens. That I could see some real benefit to being in a shared space with shared, the dominoes I think are important for this. The police, I would like to see just that conversation be broached in a way that would be helpful for, our community to see the benefit of the police and what they bring to us. Fire department has generally had a different relationship with the community, and I think both of them could benefit from that as well.
Jim or Scott?
So on the community center side, I do highly support the intergenerational aspect of getting the senior center and the community center in general co-located. I think there will be a lot of benefits to that, along with the domino effect of opening up the Masonic Temple for other uses for the community. Police and fire department, I think it's, we do need improved facilities. I think that's a given. It's just, there's a lot of, I don't have a huge opinion on whether they're combined or not, but we do need new facilities for our community, because they do represent our community as a whole and add to the quality of life that we have good fire and police forces in our community.
Great, thanks, Jim. And so if you didn't have a full day to go on and on about it, not go on and on, but share, because I know you've been working on this for a long time, and you have tons of input related to it, but what are the highlights kind of from your perspective?
So partially in response to what Carol mentioned earlier is that a lot of the comments about the police were specifically about placing the police in close proximity to children of low-income families and families of color. In that basically, historically speaking, going back to, you know, police initially being used as, you know, hunters for runaway slaves all throughout the history of the country. Basically, police are used to police the poor and people of color who are generally considered to be undesirable by the kind of white, you know, dominant community. And so putting those two together would basically take away the kind of unique nature of the rec center that Ethan mentioned. And there's plenty of families that I've talked to firsthand and other leaders in the community have talked to who said they would stop bringing their children to the rec center if the police station was right there. If parents themselves have, you know, possible questionable relationships to the community, they would not want to be there. And so part of it is that despite, you know, a desire to maybe have police and kids get along, that's not a realistic goal. I don't think. There's research that goes along with it. I think it would just increase the kind of school to prison pipeline that already exists. I also would really love if the kind of talk about combining police and fire as a bonding issue. I would really like to see a public statement from someone in the legislature on paper that says that it will be cheaper, or that we couldn't get funding for one or the other. And there's another layer, and I was at the city council meeting when all of these numbers were gone through line by line, and these are, as Chad said at that meeting, and I don't think this is misrepresenting Chad, there's a lot of flexibility in these numbers. And so to make a decision simply saying, oh, doing them standalone versus combined would be more expensive and combined would be less expensive is very speculative based off a lot of variables, including what would be in the police station, what would be in the fire station, what would be in the community center, how much it would cost to buy stain stands, how much it would cost to buy wood and steel and all kinds of things and do demolition. And we haven't even talked about the fact that we bought a ton of land in front of Central Fire Station and never used it. And why not just expand the fire station to the land that's been sitting there the entire time I lived in Winona. And so there's a lot of permutations that we could have that would be different. That wouldn't necessarily cost more. And which is why I asked Chad about like a conversation with the county, just in the same way that the St. Fran's purchase is very contingent, the possibility of remodeling or placing the police in the LEC is still very contingent. I think, you know, just dropping on a huge building in the East End is really, or in any neighborhood for that matter, is going to destroy the neighborhood. The current locations of where they are, whether they're downtown, as Ethan said, or where the Central Fire Station is, the community kind of already knows that. But I'm trying to make general arguments, not just about the specific East End plan. And so, I mean, there's a part of me that would just like to know, like, throw this new police fire station up in Garvin Heights. There's a lot of land up there, you know. Why don't we put it up by a bunch of rich folks in the community, rather than plopping it in poor neighborhood that has, you know, needs the green space. I don't know what the response times are getting down the road, but I've never heard anyone talk about that as a serious concern. There's a lot of land. We talked about it last week, or last time we talked about house. So pop it up there if we really need to. So,
All right. Any other further discussion? Well, we are a few minutes over. But if you're itching to say something, now's the time. All right, so I will do my best to go ahead and summarize the discussion that we had related to some considerations. And again, like I said, what I'll do is I'll package everything up that we've discussed, get it to you before the next meeting on August 31st. So you can take a quick look at it. Then at that meeting, we'll take a look at everything and suggest modifications or changes, and then decide which ones we'd like to include as a full write-up in the comp plan. So thank you so much for your time, everybody. We'll see you in another 2 weeks at 1:30.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, 31st.
Yep, no, that's. It's double check. My man.
All right. Signing off.
Thanks, everybody.